Yeah, climate change on ecosystem. One way that scientists gain understanding of how global warming will affect ecosystem is to analyze the effects of past climate on paleo ecosystem. Paleo ecosystem is an ecosystem that existed in the former geologic time period. In this study, conducted by the US Global Change Research Program in Washington, D.C., first in the year 2001 and then updated in 2004, in trying to predict what effect of future climate change would have on ecosystem. They concluded that climate change has the potential to affect the structure, function, and regional distribution of ecosystem and thereby affect the goods and service they provide. The Canadian model projected that South Asian ecosystem will lose carbon in the near term because they predict that climate that will become hot and dry. The biogeographic model looks at a changing landscape based on changes in CO2, evaporation, vegetation establishment, and competition between species growth rate and life cycle mortality rates. In this model, scientists at both the Hadley and Canadian Center for Climate Change agree that vegetations will be able to freely move from one location to the another. Next. Yeah. Changes in vegetation distribution will vary from region to region, which are as follows. Coming to one by one state, if you see, Northeast. In Northeast, forest remains the dominant natural vegetation, but forest mixes will change. There will also be increase in savannas and wetlands. Whereas in the southwest, forest remains the dominant ecosystem, but mixes change. Savannas and grassland encroach on forests, especially towards the end of 21st century. Drought and wildfire contribute significantly to forest destruction. Midwest. Forest remains the dominant land cover, but changes in species type occur. There will be a modest expansion of savannas and grasslands. Great Plains. In Great Plains, we see slight increase in woody vegetation, whereas heat, the area of desert ecosystem, shrinks and forest ecosystem grows more. Whereas in Northwest, forest area grows steadily. Changes in vegetation distribution will vary from region to region, whereas in this regard, a separate study conducted by the Canadian government predicts the following ecosystem changes as a result of changing climate over the next 100 years. Whereas in the coastline, we see flooding and erosion in coastal region. Number two is increase of sea level. Whereas in forest, we see increase in pest, and secondly, we see increase in level of drought, fire. Whereas the plants and animals, we see warmer temperature could make water supplies scarce, having a negative impact on plants and animals, not giving them time to adjust. Whereas the crops, we see in some areas, warmer climate may allow a 3 to 5 week extension of the frost-free season, which could benefit commercial agriculture. In other areas, drier soil and lack of water will have a negative impact on agriculture productivity. Next, when you see the wells, the quality and the quantity of the drinking water may be threatened by increasing drought. Even today, we see in most of the areas, even in India, we face the same problem. Next, when we consider about the harsh weather, in this winter storms, floods, drought, heat waves, and tornadoes could become more frequent and sometimes it's severe too. Whereas in the fisheries part, we see population ranges of species sensitive to change in water temperature will be negatively affected. In fisheries, we'll continue with the salmon harvest will be lower in the Pacific area where we find alternative solution in certain sense. Next, changes in the ocean currents will have a negative impact on the fisheries, especially in the Antarctic region. Whereas in the lakes and rivers, water levels will decline under the influence of drought, negatively affecting drinking water quality. In the same, we also see use of lakes transportation, recreation, and the fishing and the ability to generate electricity may be curtailed under drought-like conditions. And finally, other areas that may have an increase in participation may experience flooding, rising sea level, and severe storms. Next topic, if you see, climate change's impact on ecosystem. Here in this, climate change affects ecosystem at multiple levels from the population that make up ecosystem to the service they provide to communities, economies, and people. Here we find four key impacts are described in this section. I'll focus only the main title. Number one is changes in species and population. Then number two, changes in timings of natural events and cycles. In this changes in timings of natural events and cycles, we find to explore the many ways in which changing physical environment affects ecosystem and the living things that live in them. Climate change is also changing the way species and population interact with the environment and one another. These impacts can be felt throughout an entire ecosystem. Next is changes in ecosystem interaction. For example, climate change is increasing the spread of invasive species in some areas. An invasive species is one that is not native to an area. Invasive species can outcompete native plants and animals, bringing new diseases and causes other problems. These changes can create significant environment and sometimes it leads to economic warming. That harm leads to many dangers, not only for the species and for the humans also. Climate change can worsen bark beetle outbreaks, which are killing trees and disrupting ecosystem at worldwide. Ecosystem and the benefits often refer to an ecosystem service which support key aspects of human existence. As a result, they are the foundation to large parts of the economy. Globally, ecosystem services are worth as estimated $125 to $145 trillion per year. Next, we will see about the ecosystem and economy. Climate change impacts affects the livelihoods of millions of people around the globe, including fisheries, loggers, ranchers, and farmers. For example, the stress caused by rising water temperature in ocean acidification will cost the shellfish industry hundreds of millions of dollars. Shifting ranges for certain fish mean that fishers may need to travel farther to catch them or purchase new equipment to reach those areas. These shifts are projected to result in losses of hundreds of millions of dollars each year by the year 2100. Agriculture in different parts of the world will experience economic impacts with climate change. Most frequent and severe heat waves, droughts, and extreme rainfall, even along with expanding pest ranges, can disrupt agriculture in many ways. Overall warming is expected to have negative effects on the yield of major crops, though crops in some individual locations may benefit from earlier springs and milder winter weather. Disruption to agriculture and food supply chains can have economic impact for farmers and farm workers and affect the price of food. Climate change also affects the tourism and recreation industries in one way or the other. Communities that depend on tourism will feel these economic impacts the most in future. Population impacts. From the figure, we can make use of this. Invasive pest can spread in firewood when visiting a campsite or bonfire. Be sure to buy local wood or wood that has been treated to kill pests. And be sure not to take any unburdened wood back home with you. Some communities depend on ecosystem and the service more than others, including some indigenous and rural communities. As ecosystem change, some group also may be able to adapt better than others due to geographic, social, or economic factors. Continuing with the population impact, indigenous communities have a unique relationship with the environment. Climate change impacts on ecosystem can harm even to indigenous people ability to preserve and sustain their cultural heritage. Shifting animals' ranges can disrupt indigenous people ability to hunt and fish as the animal move beyond their tribal lands. Many rural communities depend on ecosystem-related livelihood, including farming, fishing, and raising livestock. People in these people in these areas are more likely to see economic impacts when faced with ecosystem challenges such as invasive species and decreased soil quality. Coming to the dimension of climate change, we see vast changes in the dimension of climate change and also in different angles we see. First, to begin with, the dimension of climate change encompasses physical aspects such as rising global temperature and extreme weather events, social economic factors like impacts on poverty, health, livelihood, and the economy, political and governance aspects, including policy making and international agreements, social and cultural considerations like public opinion and awareness, and ethical principles such as justice, equity, and the prevention of harm. Additionally, there are structural dimensions involving regional variations, climate change impacts, and exposure, and the environmental dimension like biodiversity loss and ecosystem disruption. As we see in the dimension, first one, we see physical dimension. In physical dimension, number one, we can see temperature and weather patterns. In this, global average temperature increases and shift in weather patterns, including the frequency and intensity of extreme events. Secondly, in physical dimension, we see environmental impacts. In this, we see changes in species composition, biological shift, altered ocean currents, and increased insect infestations. And B, we see, second, we see socio-economic dimension. And dimension, we see another dimension, we see poverty and vulnerability. In poverty and societies and economics increasing vulnerability, especially for the poor. Also, we see in social economic dimension, health and food security. In health and food security, threats to human health and the potential for widespread food insecurity. And also, we see livelihood in this social economic dimension. Here, the disruption of the livelihood, particularly the sectors reliant on agriculture and natural resources. And thirdly, we see political and governance dimension. In this political and government dimension, we see some one or two topics, subtopics in this. Number one is government action. In government action, the crucial role of government in implementing policies for emission reduction and the transition to low carbon economy. Secondly, international cooperation. In this, we see the need for and challenge of international climate agreements within the nations. And thirdly, we see climate justice. The fair and equitable distribution of the impacts of climate change and benefits of climate action. And number four, we see social and cultural dimension. In this also, we have two different topics. Number one is public opinion. In this public opinion, public beliefs, concern, and support for government action on climate change. And secondly, awareness and activism. The role of public awareness is important. Misinformation and climate movements exist. And next, we see ethical dimension. Under ethical dimension, we see two topics. Number one is justice and equity, and second is sustainable development. In justice and equity, it upholding principles of justice, equity, and the prevention of harm in addressing climate change. Whereas in the sustainable development, we see the importance of sustainable development as a core ethical principle. Finally, we see spatial dimension. In this, we see regional difference, that variation in the magnitude and nature of climate changes across different geographical regions. Continuing with this, we'll see the causes of climate change. The general state of Earth's climate is dependent upon the amount of energy stored by the climate system, and in particular, between the amount of energy the Earth receives from the sun in the form of light-and ultraviolet radiation and the amount of energy the Earth releases back to space in the form of infrared energy. The causes of climate change involve any process that can alter this global energy balance. Scientists call this as climate forcing. Here, we understand that climate forcing forces the climate to change. I repeat, scientists call this as climate forcing. Here we understand that climate forcing forces the climate change. There are many climate forcing causes, but broadly speaking, they can be separated into major two types. Number one, internal type, and secondly, external type. Whereas in the internal type, we see the internal process operates from within the Earth's climate system, and that includes changes in the global energy balance due to changes in ocean circulation or changes in the composition of the atmosphere. Whereas on the other side, external process, external type, we see the operate outside planet Earth that includes changes in the global energy balance due to variation in the Earth orbit around the sun and changes in the amount of energy received from the sun. Other climatic forcing processes include the impacts of large volcanic eruption and pollution with comets or meteorites. However, other causes of climate change increase the Earth on much shorter time scales, with change sometimes occurring within a single generation. Indeed, our present population of the atmosphere with greenhouse gases may be causing the global climate change. This man-made climate change has become known as global warming. Next, we see climate forcing. There are a number of natural mechanisms that can upset this balance. For example, fluctuation in the Earth's orbit, variation in the ocean circulations, and changes in the composition of the Earth's atmosphere. In recent years, the latter has been evident as a not of natural processes but of man-made pollution through emission of greenhouse gases. By altering the global energy balance, such mechanisms force the climate change. Consequently, scientists call them as climate forcing mechanism. Climate system. At a planetary scale, the global climate is regulated by how much energy the Earth receives from the Sun. However, the global climate is also affected by other flows of energy which take place within the climatic system itself. This global climate system is made of atmosphere, the ocean, the ice sheets, living organisms, and the soil, sediments, and rock, which all affects you to greater or less extent movement of heat around the surface, Earth's surface. The atmosphere plays a crucial role in the regulation of Earth's climate. The atmosphere is a mixture of different gases and aerosols collectively known as air. Air consists mostly of nitrogen and oxygen, as all of you know. However, despite their relative scarcity, the so-called greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide and methane, have a dramatic effect on the amount of energy that is stored within the atmosphere and consequently the Earth's climate. These greenhouse gas trap heat within the lower atmosphere that is trying to escape the space and is doing so make the difference of the Earth hotter. In the last 200 years, the man-made emission of greenhouse gases have enhanced the natural greenhouse effect that may be causing global warming. And before concluding, I would like to focus the information about the present context, what has been happening. We all of you know what is COP 30, Conference of People. The main theme of this year, 2025, of COP 30 is reducing greenhouse gas emission. Here it says adaptation to climate change, climate fixes for developing countries. And as you know, COP, Conference of People 30, is the 30th UN Climate Change Conference that is scheduled to be held in the month November 10 to 21, 2005 in Belém, in the Brazil of South America. It is critical annual global meeting where world leaders, scientists, and civil societies gather to discuss and negotiate action to address climate change. Some of the key focus of the conference will include the natural climate action achieving 1.5 degree global temperature and also to limit the goals and also discussing about the finance and adaptation for the developing nation. And when we see this topic, it goes on and there is no end for this topic, but the government and almost at international level, people are making more effort to bring a common solution for all the people living around the globe. Thank you.